Hello and welcome to the channel Literature Simplified, where I explain works of literature in simple English. Today we are going to discuss the short story The Last Lesson by Alphonse Daudet. Alphonse Daudet was a French writer best known for his short stories and realistic writings about everyday life, and he wrote this story during the years 1870 to 1871. This story takes place in Alsace, a region of France that borders Germany during the Franco-Prussian War that was being fought during that time. In 1870, France lost the war with Prussia, which was a powerful kingdom made up of many German states. It had a very strong army, and after defeating France in 1871, it took over Alsace and Lorraine and imposed the German language there. In this story, a young boy from Alsace goes to his French class immediately after this event has occurred, and he learns something very surprising there. Now let's get straight to the story. So the story is narrated by Franz, a young French boy who's telling us about a typical school day. He thinks it's a typical school day, but as we'll find out, it's not. Franz starts the story by telling us that he was very late for school that morning and he was very afraid that he was going to get yelled at by his teacher, Monsieur Hamel. Monsieur stands for Mr. in French. His teacher had informed them that he would be questioning them on participles, that is grammar, a lesson in grammar, and he didn't know anything about it. For a moment he thought he would run away and spend the day outdoors. It was a lovely day, so warm, so bright. The birds were chirping in the forest. In the open field at the back, there was a sawmill where the Prussian soldiers were drilling. He thought about all this and he said, I think I should just bunk school today and go and enjoy myself outside. But he said, no, I think I should go to school, otherwise I'll be in a lot of trouble later. As he was running to school, he passed by the town hall and he saw that there was a large crowd of people outside and they were all reading the bulletin board. You know, when notices are put up. Franz remembered that for the past 2 years, all the bad news had come from that notice board. Every time a new notice was put up, there would be some bad news in the town. The battles that they lost, the draft, that means the orders for people to join the army, the orders of the commanding officers. Everything that was bad news for their towns used to be put up on the notice board. As he ran past and saw that crowd looking at the notice board, he thought, oh my gosh, what is the problem now? What new notice has been put up? As he was running past, the blacksmith named Wachter and his assistant were standing there and reading the bulletin board. As they saw him pass, they said, don't go so fast. You have plenty of time to get to school. Don't be in such a hurry. Franz thought he's making fun of him because he was already late for school, right? And by the time he reached Monsieur Hamel's garden, he was out of breath. The way the school was, it was a school room on the ground floor where his teacher taught the class. Upstairs is where the teacher lived and outdoors was a garden. So usually before school started, there was always a lot of noise. Children were running around, screaming, shouting, laughing, having fun. You could hear the sound out on the street. The children closing their desks, reciting their poems, and the teacher banging his ruler on the table. Usually these were the sounds that Franz could hear every day. But now it was completely silent. Franz had been thinking, while everybody's making all that noise and everybody's distracted, I'll quietly run in and I'll go and sit at my desk. But he had not expected it to be so quiet on that morning. He looked in through the window and he saw his classmates. They were sitting quietly and Monsieur Hamel was walking up and down with his ruler under his arm. And he opened the door quietly and he tried to go in. He was so frightened and he was red. He was blushing because he was so self-conscious that people would turn around and look at him. But nothing happened. Monsieur Hamel saw him and didn't yell at him, didn't shout, didn't say anything. He just said, go and sit down, Franz. We were just about to begin our lesson. So he jumped over all the benches and went and sat down at his desk. Once he had settled down, then he looked properly at his teacher and he realized that his teacher was wearing his best clothes, which he wore for, Sunday church service. A beautiful green coat, a frilly shirt, a black silk cap. This was all the fashion that they used to wear at that time. All embroidered, like his best clothes that he owned. Franz knew that his teacher never wore these clothes unless it was a very important day at school, such as prize distribution or school inspection. And overall, today the school seemed very quiet and strange. But the thing that surprised him the most was that on the back benches, which were always empty, today the village people had come and sat over there. There was an old man named Hauser who was also wearing his three-cornered hat and sitting at the back, along with the former mayor of Alsace, the former postmaster, and several other people from the village. Everybody looked very sad, and Hauser had brought his old primer. You know, primers are the books we use when we just start learning how to read. So it was a very, very old book that he had probably used many, many years ago. And now it was held open on his knees and his specs were lying on that primer. And while Franz was trying to make sense of all of this and figure out what was going on, Monsieur Hamel climbed on the chair to address the class, and in a very gentle tone, he said, "Children, this is the last lesson I'll be giving you. There is an order come from Berlin. Berlin is in Germany, to teach only German from now on in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine, the two places that had been taken over by Prussia. From tomorrow, a new master will come and he will be teaching you all in German. So today, this is your last French lesson. So I want you to be very attentive to what I'm teaching." This came as a shock to Franz. This was not what he was expecting. And then he realized, oh, that's the notice that was up on the notice board when I ran past. Then it suddenly struck him. This is my last French lesson, but I hardly even know how to write in French. I'm not going to be able to learn French anymore. And then he started feeling very sorry for all those times when he had bunked his classes, he had gone running after birds' eggs or playing in the river. He thought, I should have been in class instead, learning French. Earlier, his books used to seem like such a nuisance. Why do I need to carry all these books? History and grammar and this and that. But now he felt like those were his old friends and he didn't want to give them up. And suddenly he felt very sad to realize that Monsieur Hamel would also be going away. And he would never hear him rapping his ruler on the desk again, or how he would be grumpy and yell at him. Suddenly he didn't mind any of that anymore. And then he realized that, oh, all these people who are sitting at the back of the class in their best clothes, they've come here for Monsieur Hamel. It was because they were feeling sorry as well that they had not paid better attention in class. This was their way of thanking their master for the 40 years of service, of teaching. And it was their way of showing respect for the country that was no longer going to be theirs. While he was deep in all these thoughts, he heard his name being called, and his teacher said it was his turn to recite. Suddenly, he felt very sorry. He felt like I would have given anything to be able to recite the rule of the participle. Basically, he had to recite a rule of grammar. He had to know it by heart, but he didn't know it. And he said at that moment, I wish I had known it by heart without making a single mistake. I could have just recited it loud and clear. But the moment he started saying it, he got mixed up and he put his head down and he stood holding onto his desk. He was suddenly very scared because he knew that he would get yelled at by Monsieur Hamel. But he didn't get yelled at. And Monsieur Hamel said to Franz, "That's okay, Franz. I'm not going to scold you because I'm sure you're feeling bad enough already. See, this is how it is. Every day we say to ourselves, it's okay, I have plenty of time. I'll learn this tomorrow. But now look what has happened." That's the problem with all of Alsace. Everybody used to say, oh, school is not that important. Lessons are not that important. We'll learn this tomorrow. Now those fellows will come, those Germans, and they'll say to everyone, how is it that you pretend to be Frenchmen, but you can neither speak nor write your own language? But it's not your fault, Franz. All of us are in the same boat. All your parents were not serious enough about you learning your language. They preferred if you all went to work on the farm or in the mills so that they could earn little more money to support the family. And even I am to blame, because sometimes even I would send you to water my flowers instead of learning your lessons. And when I wanted to go fishing, I would just declare a holiday and go. Then Monsieur Hamel went on talking about the French language, saying that it was the most beautiful language in the world, the clearest, the most logical. And he said that they must guard it amongst themselves and never forget it. Because he said that when people are enslaved, when somebody else is ruling over them, even if everything else is taken away, but as long as they hold on to their language, it's as if they hold the key to their own prison. Then Monsieur Hamel opened a grammar book and he started reading out a lesson. And Franz was surprised how well he understood it. He said it seemed so easy, but perhaps it had always been easy. It's just that I didn't listen to it so carefully before. And perhaps my teacher had never explained anything with so much patience also ever before. It was as if suddenly he wanted to give us all his knowledge all at once and to ensure that we understood everything perfectly. After the grammar lesson, they had a lesson in writing. That day, his teacher had brought new books for them and they had to trace out, like they had to practice their writing. They wrote France, Alsace over and over again repeatedly. Everybody was busy writing. There was no sound except the scratching of the pens on the paper. Some beetles flew in through the window. Beetles are insects, but nobody paid any attention to them. Normally, beetles or any insects fly into the room. You know how children will scream, shout, chase them, try to shoo them out. Nobody paid any attention this time. The children were busy tracing their letters of the alphabet, and on the roof the pigeons were cooing. And Franz thought to himself, are they going to make these pigeons also sing in German? Franz was busy writing, but whenever he looked up at his teacher, he saw that he was just sitting in his chair and staring first at one thing, then next time at something else, as if he was trying to fix in his mind how everything looked in the classroom. He was trying to create a mental picture in his mind so that he would remember this classroom forever. For 40 years, Monsieur Hamel had been there in the same classroom, with the same garden outside, with the window and the class in front of him. Only the desks and benches had got worn out over the years because of so many students sitting at it generation after generation. The walnut trees in the garden had grown taller, and the hop vine, it's a type of plant. He had planted this vine himself, Monsieur Hamel, and it had grown round and round. It had climbed over the windows and reached right till the roof. Franz thought, this man must be so sad to leave all this behind, something so familiar, something that he had called his home for so many decades, things he had lovingly planted in his garden. Every brick, every window, every plant was so familiar to him. And now he had to leave it all and leave the country with his sister the next day. And today Franz was paying close attention to every single lesson. After writing, then they had a lesson in history, and then the little children were chanting their vowels, syllables. You know the way we learn A, E, I, O, U, our vowels? The same way the little children were learning their vowels. At the back of the classroom, Hauser had put on his spectacles and he was reading his primer and spelling the letters along with the little children who were reciting their vowels. He was also crying and his voice was shaking because he was so emotional. And in a way, it was so funny to hear him when he was reciting his vowels along with the little children that we also wanted to cry, but we were laughing at him because it all sounded so funny. And Franz says he remembers that last lesson very clearly. Every single thing that was said, every single thing that was taught, it's etched in his memory forever. Suddenly, the church clock struck 12. Then the Angelus. Angelus is a type of prayer that is repeated every few hours. At the same time, the Prussians were blowing their trumpets. So they had been returning from their army training and they blew their trumpets to announce their arrival. They could hear the sound right under their school windows. Monsieur Hamel stood up very pale in his chair. It was suddenly as if he was brought back to reality. He looked very pale, but he stood up very straight. He tried to address the people in the room. He said, "My friends, I But he couldn't say anything more than that. He was so choked up with emotion that he just could not go on speaking. Then he turned around to his blackboard and with a piece of chalk, he wrote as large as he could on the board, "Vive la France." That means, "Long live France." Then he stopped writing and he just leaned his head against the wall. And without a single word, he just made a movement with his hand to the class and he said, "School is dismissed. You may go." So that was the explanation of the short story, The Last Lesson by Alphonse Daudet. Now, this is a fictional story that tries to imagine what went through the minds of people when they were told that they could no longer use their mother tongue, but they had to adopt the German language instead. Imagine how your life would change if you had been speaking a language every day from childhood and now suddenly you need to abandon that language entirely and speak a completely different language. I'm sure it feels like a very basic freedom is being taken away from you. It feels like an important part of your identity is being destroyed and replaced with something new and unfamiliar. As human beings, we are patriotic towards our country, our culture, our language, because it's an important part of who we are. And now most of us live in countries with established governments and strong defense forces, and countries are generally not fighting wars and trying to occupy each other's territories. But earlier it was different. And most often, people whose country had been conquered had to adopt the rules, language, and culture of the nation that had conquered them. But that doesn't mean that they forgot or stopped being loyal towards their country, towards their people, or their language. Now let's examine what the main themes of this story are. The first theme is the regret that the characters feel for not valuing their language and culture enough until it was forcefully taken away from them. They did not appreciate these things enough when they had them, which makes the loss very great when it was taken away from them forever. The next is patriotism. The people in the story are French and they feel deep sorrow and regret that their French land is being handed over to the Germans. That their identity and culture as French people, of which language is a very important part, is being wiped out totally. Another theme is the importance of education. If the older men sitting at the back of the class had learned as much as they could have when they had the time, or the younger boys had paid more attention and attended their classes instead of bunking, then they would have had a chance of learning and preserving a lot of their language, which now they will never get the chance to do. Another theme is language as a means of resistance against repression. That is why Monsieur Hamel tells his students that as long as they hang on to their language, it is as if they hold the key to the prison that they are in. It is the one thing that they can hold on to when they have lost everything else. The next theme is the effects of war. War causes a lot of physical destruction and damage, no doubt, but also deeply affects the daily lives of ordinary people as well. It takes away a lot of their freedoms and benefits. It causes a lot of fear and uncertainty in them and destroys their sense of identity and value. The last theme, but perhaps the most important, is the dedication of Monsieur Hamel and his sense of duty. The character of Monsieur Hamel shows us the true devotion of a teacher. Even though he knows this is his last day in school, he comes dressed in his best clothes. He teaches seriously and does not waste even a single moment. He doesn't express anger or bitterness, but teaches with dignity and pride. This shows his deep respect for his duty and his dedication to his students and to the French language. The title The Last Lesson stands not only for the last lesson being taught by Monsieur Hamel, but the last lesson for that French class, the last lesson as a free region, the last lesson that teaches them about their language, culture and heritage. It's the last lesson that they will be learning as French people before they become Prussians. So that was the explanation of the last lesson. I hope this helped you to understand the story clearly. Do subscribe to the channel for more literature explained in simple English, and I'll see you in the next video.